Well, the time has come, everybody. It's past 8:30 by a few minutes, and we are so grateful you showed up on a beautiful morning. We had an extra hour, and that's probably why you might be here all chipper and happy that you've already had an hour extra this morning. It's not 8:30, it really is 9:30 for our body, but for now, it's 8:30 to learn more about the border, and I'm so grateful for Nate Ledbetter, to my right, who's going to be presenting a program on what he does and what others do on the border. And Nate and his family staying with me, we've had such a wonderful time since yesterday, and they'll be showing up at some point. Not sure. On their way. Yes. They're on their way right now. Wife Melissa, and there's Shiloh and Levi and Zeke are going to show up. If you see younger people here, that's who they are, most likely. And so we're going to have a great morning of understanding what's happening down at the border. What's going on? We heard a glimpse of that from Andrew and crew who went down there in early October. We're going to hear more from Andrew and crew later on this month and in December. But Nate's going to give us a real foundation of border ministry and the situation south of us. So without me rambling on anymore, Nate Ledbetter, please join us.
Morning, hey, Pastor Andrew. Good to see you, brother. Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me with you. I'm so grateful to join with you this morning. And it sounds like we have about an hour or so.
An hour or so, yeah.
And so we can unpack a few things. And my wife, Melissa, we just celebrated 21 years in June. And we have 4 kids. 3 are with us today. Our oldest is back home, and she's enjoying. She's a quiet soul. She just turned 18. She said, I think I'm going to have a day just to enjoy the silence. We said, that's great. So I've been there. So, and then our other kids are about to arrive in a little while. It's Pastor here mentioned, and I have a lot on the heart, and I thought I would approach this morning a little bit is what we might describe as reflections for the journey, and tying that into what we're calling ethical storytelling. And all of this is intricately connected to our life and our work and the community that we're so grateful to be a part of in the borderlands. I would love to start with a reflection, if that's okay. Melissa, she and I have enjoyed this reflection at times, and this is, if you know an author, her name is Jan Richardson, and she is a wonderful writer, author, and poet. And she writes this: for those who have far to travel. If you've heard this, you might enjoy it again here with me. And she writes this. She writes, if you could see the journey whole, you might never undertake it. Might never dare first step that propels you from the place you have known toward the place you know not. Call it one of the mercies of the road, that we see it only by stages as it opens before us, as it comes into our keeping, step by single step. There is nothing for it but to go, and by our going, take the vows the pilgrim takes, to be faithful to the next step, rely on more than the map, to keep the signposts of intuition and dream, to follow the star that only you will recognize, to keep an open eye for the wonders that attend the path, to press on beyond distractions, beyond fatigue, beyond what would tempt you from the way. There are vows that only you will know. The secret promises for your particular path and the new ones you will need to make when the road is revealed by turns you could not have foreseen. Keep them, break them, make them again. Each promise becomes part of the path. Each choice creates the road that you will take to that place. Keep them, break them, make them again. Where at last you kneel to offer the gift most needed. The gift that only you can give before turning to go home to another way. That's Jan Richardson. And her reflection in so many ways ties into the life of our family, the family journey that we've had, as well as even alongside so many of our neighbors and loved ones on the border. So this, just very quickly, this is my wife, Melissa, in the back. And next to her is our youngest, who's Zeke. Say hey, Zeke. And he just turned 12. Shiloh, 16. And then Levi over here, 14. Hanging out. So, we've had a journey. This prayer, this poem speaks to the depth of a lot of our journey, where so much of the journey has been unexpected. We've lived in a handful of cities, and I thought it would be good to share a little bit about who we are, just out of, I'm huge on relationship. I believe everything rests on relationship, in every direction. And I'm also compelled by this idea of longing to be in right relationship in every direction. Right relationship with the divine, right relationship with our loved ones, our neighbors, right relationship with ourselves, right relationship with our surroundings, our environment, our neighborhoods. And on this All Saints Day, I think of so many who've gone before us, who've called historically to call us toward right relationship. In a lot of ways, we could describe justice that way, that the pursuit of justice is really a pursuit, a longing for things to be whole, to be in right relationship. And our journey has it's been interesting. We try to be learners. I sometimes would describe myself as a co-learner, a co-follower of Jesus. So we try to only go where we're invited or where there's community confirmation. And I say that especially as a white male in the United States and these, especially in the Americas and in the borderlands, it's so important for me and with my family to make sure that we're aligned in community and in relationship where that invitation and that confirmation is made known. And so our journey early on, I'm from the Michigan area, I'm from the northern border. I was born in the Detroit area. And growing up, I never really thought of Detroit, Michigan as like the border, or a border town. But it really is. There are folks from all over the world in the Detroit area. We think of Dearborn, Michigan. Dearborn has more folks, neighbors and loved ones from the Near East, the Middle East, than any other part of the world outside of the Middle East, Dearborn, Michigan. And there are voices from all over the map in the Metro Detroit area. And that's where I grew up as a little guy, playing basketball my whole life, and God seemed to use round ball to capture my heart with those unlike me, and in friendship and relationship, playing ball in the city and the suburbs. And fast forwarding, after college, I went to seminary in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and that's where Melissa and I met. And we were a part of a justice-minded, shalom-focused community in West Michigan, and building partnerships and global relationships in different ways. And And that really widened our perspective on life. And next thing we knew, we were invited to move into a multi-ethnic community there in the heart of the city, in a little mid-sized city called Grand Rapids. And I thought, wow, I had a picture of what I thought Grand Rapids was like. Little did I know that the nations are in Grand Rapids and in Metro Grand Rapids, like so many of our cities. And that began a journey. And so Jan Richardson speaks here, to trust, to take the next step, to keep trusting. And I'm attempting to learn this idea that life is often a trust walk. It's like Jesus of Nazareth turning around and saying, who do you say that I am? Do you trust me? Do you trust me? Do you trust me? And so we're just attempting to practice that trust over and over again. We moved into this multi-ethnic community, began forming friendships, partnerships, and we joined this wider association of folks involved at the margins, all over the map, and learning from each other best practices, shared worship experiences and gatherings. And the next thing we knew, we were invited to join a collective, all working together on the south side of Atlanta, Georgia. And so we moved into a historically Black community there, and that's when my kids were real little. And you never know where the journey will take you, right? Does anyone relate to this, where you just never know where you might land? I'll get to the border, I promise, in a minute here. But as an example, and I have permission to share this story from my young guy here. But I remember when a few of our kids had come along, our daughters, and our third was due, and Melissa, was feeling a little tired, but feeling okay. And she said, I don't think this baby's coming for several more days. We were in Atlanta. I was sitting on the front porch on our block. It's a beautiful, beautiful sunny evening in Georgia. You spent time in Georgia. It's just, there's something magical about the block in South Atlanta, right? And I'm sitting there, and Melissa said, she's resting upstairs. And somebody had just started a barbecue on the grill. And it was like you could smell the smoke of the barbecue waffling through the air, coming down the block. And I'm sitting there just enjoying life, And then all of a sudden, I heard Melissa holler out, "Nay, nay!" I'm like, oh my goodness, that doesn't sound like the restful, this baby's not coming for a while. But something's off. So I ran upstairs, and I thought I was a veteran, right? This was number 3. So I had my bag packed and I had things ready, and just in case. And I walked up, and she said, call Amy, our friend, who was like a doula, right? And so I called Amy, and no, before I called Amy, we called the doctor. And the doctor, we got her on the phone, and she said, "Calm down, this baby, it's fine. Everything's fine." I said, "No, she's hollering out. Something's off here." And so it kept heightening, and I thought, I've got to do something here. So then we called our doula friend, and she said, "No, I'm coming over right now. Don't listen to the doctor. This baby is on the way." It's like, oh my goodness. So Amy rushes over. She lived only a few minutes away. And we helped Melissa downstairs. We got her into the back seat of the car. And Amy said, "Would you like me to come with you?" I said, "Yes, please." So she's coaching Melissa through the console, between the seats. And I'm driving, and we lived on the south side of Atlanta, and the hospital was on the north side. So I had to drive from downtown Atlanta. So at this point, it's in the evening, it's getting darker, and I'm driving through downtown Atlanta at about 90 plus miles an hour, trying to get there as quickly, because I could hear things tightening right in the back seat. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I get to the hospital, and I pulled in to the parking lot. Now I'm going to pause. Just help me to remember, I'm parked in the parking lot at the hospital. Okay. Side note: we were borrowing our friend's car. Okay, so our van had broke down, And our buddy, he's this football legend. Some people know about him, some people don't. But for the sake of the story, he gave us permission to share this story too. His name's Danny Werfel. If you're a sports person, he was the Heisman at Florida, and just a really great guy, like an older brother. And we did ministry and life together in Atlanta. They're still in Atlanta. So our car breaks down several days prior to this moment of parking in the parking lot. And Danny says, "Why don't you borrow my car? I'm sure nothing will happen and everything will be fine." I said, "Yeah, no, nothing will happen. Thank you so much." And okay, so now we're fast forwarding. I'm driving this borrowed car into the parking lot. I park and I said, "Okay, I'm gonna rush in." So I rush in, you know those winding doors in hospitals that, you know, where you have to push it and then it goes like this. So I pushed the door through, and the nurse at the front desk, I said, "My wife, she's about that." She's, no, calm down. She's not having a baby. And so she wasn't listening. She was talking in slow motion. I felt like I was in a movie. And so I grabbed the wheelchair. I went out. I got it maneuvered out the door. I went back out to Danny's car, opened the back door, and there's my son. And Amy's eyes are this big. My son was just born in the back seat of a car. Holy! I'm like, yes, he sure was. So I'm freaking out. Then I said, "Okay, well, what do I do now? This has never happened to me before." So then I was like, "Well, I should probably go let someone know." So then I go back into the hospital, and she still doesn't believe. I said, no. We've got a baby in the back seat of the car. She said, "What? Are you kidding me?" So then all these 15, 20 nurses and doctors rush out of the hospital. And now we're all surrounded in the parking lot. I promise you this story is going somewhere. I hope I'm not boring you on Sunday morning here. But okay, so why am I sharing all this? Okay, we'll get there, I promise. But a quick moment. The nurse surrounds Melissa and our son. Amy's, like just in awe. I'm in awe. And the nurse says, "Okay, we've got to help Melissa get into the hospital." I said, "Well, this is kind of like my moment." She said, "Your moment?" I said, "Yeah, do I get to cut the cord?" And she said, "Well, yeah, but it could really make a mess in your car." And I looked her dead straight in the face and said, "It doesn't matter. It's not my car." So she said, "What?" I said, "It's a long story. I'll tell you later." So we had a fun moment there, and then we got Melissa into the hospital, and we called Danny and his wife at about 1, 2 a.m. at that point, and they didn't believe, like, "Why are you calling me at 1:38, whatever time it was?" And then he heard the little faint cry in the back. He said, You're not joking around." I said, "I'm not joking around. My son was just born in your car." So we've been joking around about this for years. Fast forwarding the next several days, we got our son home, and all of our neighbors on our block, that very same block, all of these various neighbors started showing up at our door with gifts, welcoming the receiving of life. It was like the giving and the receiving of life in diversity, in the pursuit of beloved community. We're one guy with a lot of fanfare and media and privilege that lent us his car. And other neighbors who didn't have quite as much economically, but they offered love and joy and lived experience and community. And they surrounded our family with loving arms and said, "Welcome, welcome." And we had a little party. And it was just such a beautiful moment. And I'll always remember, this is like a picture of God's heart for all people everywhere. That we're meant to come alongside and offer welcome and hospitality and beloved community with those, no matter where they're from, no matter what their journey has looked like. And we've tried to apply that heartbeat from city to city. We were in Chicago for several years and in other parts of the South and Charlotte. And then we joined this beautiful binational, bilingual community to join a community of living saints on board. And I'm so grateful And I thought to myself, we just never know where life is gonna lead. It's like there's so much joy in the life and in the word. And in these reflections, I think I don't want to lose the joy of life. Life can be intense. There's a lot going on in the world. And I've been reflecting the last few years of the joy of justice, that when justice is pursued, when we're growing the beloved community, I don't want to lose the wonder of it. I don't want to lose the pursuit of the joy of what it's like to be in relationships with those who are unlike us, whether culturally, economically, those from different backgrounds, perspectives, that there's joy in entering relationship when we pursue those right relationships in every direction. And we've tasted some of that joy. We've tasted some pain too. And you don't get me wrong, there's a lot of suffering and trauma on the border. There's a lot of suffering and trauma in Chicago. There's a lot of suffering and trauma in Atlanta, Georgia, or Detroit, Michigan. And I'm sure here in Santa Fe and throughout New Mexico. And so what I'm attempting to learn in these reflections is there's a both and to life. My friend Jay Brooks, we used to talk about bifocals. We put on our bifocals, and on one hand, we're seeing through the lens of struggle, in pain, and trauma, wherever we find ourselves in the world. And then on the other hand, we're invited to hold that pain, that trauma, that the suffering of humankind alongside the beauty of God's movement all over the world, the beauty of the wonder of the beautiful things that are happening in our communities and world. I've never lived in a place or visited a place, locally or globally, where amazing things weren't happening, even in the most hurting communities. And I don't want to lose that there are places around the world where the lens would be, oh my goodness, despair. And there is. But within that despair, there is always, and I know always is a strong word, I would argue always, God is always at work in some beautiful way before I showed up. And God is always at work among people at the edges of society in unbelievable and beautiful and unexpected ways. I think of so many voices over the journey, people that we thank God that we've been able to learn from and enjoy life with, even in the middle of the trauma and the pain. And I think of elders on our block where we live now, in El Paso, or elders in Atlanta that we're still connected with, who still speak into our lives on occasion, or a dear friend in Chicago who writes Melissa these beautiful birthday cards every year. And just out of that, born out of these situations are these beautiful expressions of life, where the words of Jan Richardson jump off the page, the gift that only you can give. That every person on this planet, every neighborhood, every nation has something to give, has something to offer. I know that there are times when we agree or disagree with various global voices, right? But I think that if we take the approach, all truth is God's truth, I like to learn from all sorts of voices. I think of Pope John Paul II, I believe it was him, who said, and I think there's some truth in this statement. He said, there is no person, I'm paraphrasing, who is so rich that they have nothing to receive. And there is no person so poor that they have nothing to give. I thought, whoa, that's some truth. That's some truth. And so I think about our neighbors on the border who have so much to offer as we enter mutual friendships, mutual relationships. And so we try to take the approach of mutuality, mutual flourishing, the giving and the receiving of life, the pursuit of beloved community. We try to take the approach. We're trying to learn the practice of solidarity. To say, we're with you. We stand with you as we stand with one another in the middle of pain. I think of so much happening, and I'd love to shift for a minute, share a little bit about the practical side of what we're doing, and then I'll kind of come back out of the hourglass with some specifics, and then we'll do a little more reflection, if that's okay too. So we'll kind of talk some specifics for a few minutes, and then we'll widen back out with some principles on ethical storytelling and some reflection on Psalm 107 in a few moments. One is I'm so grateful to be a part of a group linked with PCUSA, which is what this community is linked with, the Presbyterian network. And our presbytery, which is, if you're familiar with that, it's like a family of churches, a connectional church of groups of voices working together in different regions around the United States and other parts of the world. And our presbytery, where we are, is called Tres Rios, the Presbytery of Tres Rios. And a variety of voices, our dear friend John Nelson and others, he's been here before several years ago, and a group got together and formed what we're calling Tres Rios Border Foundation. And we're so grateful to see a group of churches coming together. And if any of you have been on boards or served on boards or heard this principle, like the idea that ideally you would like 100% of a board to say we've contributed financially to a certain cause, right? And a lot of boards talk about this. And we thought, what if we applied that same principle within our presbytery? What would it be like if 100% of the churches in our presbytery said, we're on board, like we're with the foundation to practice solidarity and mutuality and the power of proximity at the border in this new concept of this thing forming a few years ago. And I'm so grateful to share we're not quite at 100%. And I would describe it as 100% of active churches. Some churches are, trying to hang on. This church it strikes me as a vibrant community. There are other churches that are trying to find their way, right? So, but with active churches, we have a smaller presbytery, about 25 churches. But about 15 of those churches have already said on some level, we're with you, we're a part of this. So we're starting at home, so to speak, and then widening out the vision beyond our presbytery, beyond the region at a national level as well, to try to invite other churches to say, we're with you. Now, what does the foundation do? I brought a few handouts with me here, if you have interest, and I won't read it all. You'll see some quotes, and very succinctly just sort of describes what the foundation does. But essentially, we do two things. First, the heartbeat is to inspire, equip, and connect ECUSA churches on the border and beyond. And that and beyond is connecting the principles to our backyards. We believe that the border is all interconnected with where we're living. And so where we're living is one dynamic, one expression of what's going on in the world. But we know that the border is also connected in a variety of ways to cities all over the nation. And so to inspire, equip, and connect those churches. And then what we do practically is we invite groups to come on what we describe as a border encounter, which is a 3-day, AKA listening trip. And there's some service involved as well, but it's also really heavily focused on shifting the narrative. I believe that everything is connected and that this generation is crying out for a new narrative. Transforming the narrative is a significant response to the border and to our backyards. And hey, what do you mean? Well, when narratives are hijacked or narratives are shaped a certain way, or when rhetoric begins to paint a picture about whole groups of people in certain ways, it can become literally a matter of life and death. I think of the mass shooting that took place in 2019 in El Paso. That travesty, that act of domestic violence and terrorism grew out of a narrative in a young man's mind linked with a manifesto that went as far as New Zealand, even beyond the borders of the United States. And he came to the border to commit this horrific act of violence because of a narrative. And so a part of the border encounter is inviting people to come and to process the narratives that they're hearing on the news and to rehumanize conversations outside the news cycle and to highlight the voices of the borderlands on both sides of the Rio Bravo, both sides of the border, to hear practically voices who are from the border. And it's a range of voices. It's shelter leaders, pastors, NGO leaders. Folks even get to interact with Border Patrol directly, where they hear a little presentation, and then there's a Q&A, and you can ask any question you desire with Border Patrol. They've heard it all, and it's a very interesting dialogue, and we're literally sitting on the steps facing the border wall with Border Patrol, asking questions, processing from different angles. We hear for faith-rooted groups, we walk through what we describe as a theology of migration. What does migration look like from the Hebrew scriptures all the way through the storyline of how were people on the move in the ancient text, and how can we learn from those who were on the move in the ancient scriptures, and how do those principles apply to our reality today? So we walk through issues of some of those dynamics. We do a session at the Healing Garden in the wake of the shooting. We process push-pull factors of global migration. And so all of these topics, without talking to your ear out, what that's part of what people experience on these border encounters. I would say, I think we were looking at the stat the other day from our surveys, and it's something like 99% of those who attend a border encounter would say they would return again, they would invite a friend, and that it was some significant paradigm shift, no matter where they're coming from, that it was a significant part of their personal journey, and that it changed elements of their perspective of the border itself. So what I'm attempting to do is just scratching the surface in a few minutes and in an hour here of just sort of some big picture reflections on our journey and life out of relationship. But if you come, and you're all invited, we would host you in a heartbeat if you had interest. And we walk together, we share meals together. We take you to Juarez to see some of the realities of what's going on in the El Paso Juarez sector of the border. And then we talk through the reality of narrative change, systems change, and ultimately personal change, and how those three things connect. That's one aspect of what the foundation is doing, and with a sister organization that I also work for called Alfaro. And so the other thing that we do is we fundraise. In this foundation, we fundraise to channel small grants alongside migrant communities, neighbors, shelters who are doing good work on the border. And a part of the role of the foundation on behalf of ECUSA, at least in our corridor, is to say we believe in the power of proximity. We were talking with some friends in Kentucky recently linked with the denomination and kind of dreaming out loud to say, well, if there's certain folks trying to discern ways to come alongside and give from a distance at a national level, what if the Border Foundation, who exists and is rooted on the border, could somehow collaborate with folks from a distance to say the power of proximity allows some of our voices at the border level to listen closely, to discern, to understand, the dynamics that are always changing on a regular basis. It's harder to do that from Kentucky. And so we said, wow, there's something to this. And so we're walking that out, and we've been able to come alongside and support an LGBTQ plus safe shelter across the border. What we describe as caring for caregivers. So many of the shelters, the migrant shelters that are being formed along the border are led by pastors. Not all of them, but a good majority of them are scrambling because they're having a gathering on a Sunday, and then the other 6 days of the week, their church buildings have literally become shelters with migrant neighbors from all over the map. And so the burnout rate is higher for some of these voices. And so we're behind the scenes coming alongside, trying to give access to a little getaway with their spouse or loved one to provide rest and health and wholeness, to try to see people go the distance. One of our initiatives is in partnership with Ibarra is art therapy for unaccompanied minors. There's a host of a variety of things. There's a little micro enterprise thing that where women are making jewelry and handmade soaps and shelters to try to generate income for their families. And so anyway, that's just a taste of the kind of things that the foundation and Ibarra is coming alongside. The other thing, I'm going to switch with my Ibarra hat, is Ibarra does similar. We cultivate border encounters beyond PCUSA with groups all over the map, across denominational lines, multi-faith lines, and including non-religious spaces. We also have a border response arm similar to the foundation, and we're several initiatives that Ibarra is leading or facilitating. We say we're not a shelter. We come alongside to strengthen the hand of the shelter network and to strengthen the hand of faith communities who are attempting to do good work. And then the third thing that we're doing is forming what we're describing as a borderland center for beloved community. And we're so excited. It's a 4-acre site facing the border wall. And that site is also where Trace Realty, our foundation, is renting space. So we're not in a fancy office downtown. We're not hidden somewhere inland. So we're literally like the property line. And Andrew and the group were there several weeks ago. It's like 15 feet from the border wall. We're right there. And this beautiful site is a historic site. It's one of the most historically significant sites in the entire 2,000-mile stretch of the border. And we know St. Augustine, Charleston, places like this. There are very few people who know that this particular site dates back hundreds and hundreds of years in this location in El Paso. It's so old that UNESCO recognizes it as one of the few World Heritage routes globally. It runs through the parking lot of where this center takes place. And there's layer upon layer of cultures and histories that converge in this place. And so some historians are saying there might not be another place in the United States and in this part of the Americas with this much history and culture converging in one location. We thought, what better place to form a borderland center for beloved community in a world that's polarizing and being ripped apart, and then to invite dialogue and train leaders and generate even income through this center as a nonprofit that can recycle the dollar back toward holistic impact, reduce our need for traditional fundraising long term. How cool is that? That gets me fired up. So that's a little bit of the practical work. There's a lot more to that. But for the sake of time, I'm going to zoom back out and highlight a few things briefly. One is, I'd love to reflect on Psalm 107. And this reminds us, and I'm going to tie this into a little bit of what we're seeing today, but it says, give thanks to the Lord, Yahweh, for he is good. His love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story, the saints, or we might add. Those he redeemed from the hand of the foe. Those he gathered from the lands, from east and west, from north and south. Verse 4. Some wandered in desert wastelands, finding no way to a city where they could settle. They were hungry and thirsty, and their lives ebbed away. And then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. He led them by a straight way to a city where they could settle. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for humankind, for he satisfies the thirsty and fills the hungry with good things. And the psalm goes on and on of those who wandered in desert wastelands, who were searching for a place for home. And this idea of people on the move is an ancient dynamic. And the realities of global migration really strike me with an ache in the heart in so many ways. For me, that knowing that the stats right now are saying global migration is only going to increase. In my kid's lifetime, we haven't seen anything yet. It's going to increase by the millions. This is an issue, if we can call it that. It's a dynamic, a reality that will be with this generation for decades to come. What are the causes of global migration, of forced displacement? Just very quickly, what comes to mind when we think of what causes people to have to move somewhere with little time to prepare?
Starvation.
Violence. Conflict.
War, conflict, violence,
Global capitalism.
climate change, yes, natural disasters that wipe out entire communities, right? The tsunami that wiped over Mozambique and part of Zimbabwe several years ago, or we think of Haiti or a variety of other places, and even natural disasters and climate change doesn't count towards seeking asylum, which is wild to think. All of these folks have to find a place to go, but to seek asylum is a whole different dynamic. But you've named really the core several reasons, right? War, extortion, violence, climate change, natural disasters. Gang violence is a very real thing throughout the world and the Americas. War, right? What we're seeing is what's happening in the Gaza Strip right now. In Ukraine, Poland, Russia, Sudan, Chad, Venezuela, Colombia, and the majority of those who were forcibly displaced actually are usually welcomed by an adjacent nation. Colombia has welcomed 2.5 million Venezuelans across their border. 2.5 million. So when we hear certain stats, even through our U.S. system, it's usually what our friend says. It's a ceiling, not the floor. It's not a guarantee that we're going to accept this many exits. So we hear this huge number, but we might be way down here of how many we've actually accepted. So it's complicated. When I hear immigration lawyers say that sometimes they get confused on the policies and the dynamics and the changes, it makes me sometimes feel a little bit better because we live there and it's still this constant learning curve. I mean, so I'm not here claiming to be an expert on immigration law or policy. We have friends who are, but we're grateful to be a part of the community that's responding to the ebb and flow. And our shelters right now are overwhelmed. The Juarez is overwhelmed. People are living, and not only are the shelters are full, but folks are sleeping out on the streets. Part of the Ibarra team, we have what we call shelter connectors, and there's food distribution, dinners happening because usually at night people don't like to go out at night. There's all sorts of efforts, and we're really grateful to share that there's a lot of collaboration, more so than people realize through the media. There's a lot of collaboration happening I know you're in relationship with Dr. Moya and others who we adore. We adore. If Dr. Moya was here right now, we love her. She, among so many other voices, are doing such incredible work in collaboration. We've lived in a few cities where sometimes people feel like territorial about things. The border, it's like we're doing this, and so many folks are locking arms together and coordinating together. And I promised, and I have probably shared, I hope not too much, or I hope I haven't been too long-winded this morning. I'd love to share this little handout booklet that I wrote called Ethical Storytelling, if you have interest. And the reason is because it ties into the practical work that we're doing, but it also might be an encouragement here. We try to encourage it. We share it with folks all over the country. We shared it with folks in Maine, in Nashville or this summer, and Kansas City, and wherever anyone will give us an earshot. We're attempting to heighten awareness around these principles and how we're connecting the dots at the border. So I'll pass these out real quick. I also have a few handouts and things to show online so that those online can see me here too. But we have some descriptors of Avara as well as the foundation. And if anyone's into stickers for your water bottles and all that, that sounds silly on All Saints Day, but this is like, for me, this reminds me of solidarity. It's a visual reminder made by a local artist who has a fascinating story of doing amazing work through a cafe that he calls Bread for the Resistance Cafe. Such good coffee and bakery and these baked goods from all over the Americas. And this guy, his name's George. And if you come, we would love to take you to the Resistance Cafe. But we have some of these. But these booklets here, this grew out of, I'll hand a few this way. And okay. I have enough just in case.
I just wanted to ask you, do you work with Mark Adams?
I know of Mark Adams. I'm new around here, so I've not met Mark personally.
Yeah.
But others within our network know him, and yes, and we have so much respect for his work and the journey that he's had for many, many years as a front runner voice in this work. And one of the things we often are eager to share is that wherever good work is happening within our little community in El Paso, where we're primarily focused, anytime we hear good work, we're trying to fan that flame.
Yeah, I just wondered if you had collaboration with the other Presbyterian ministries on the board. So I was wondering.
Yeah, so we're in relationship, but from the standpoint of direct work, no, only because we're all at the brim is full. But yeah, we're scrambling a lot of times, and we've talked about that with some of our colleagues.
Because I was just thinking, probably most of us here have known more about that area. So it's nice to hear from you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm interested. I'm from El Paso, so
Okay.
great to hear your energy being invested. And you're mentioning collaboration and mutuality is very heartening to hear. Because that has been an energy for seedless and seedless down there as far as how we work together. But I wonder about missed opportunities by staying in our sector frameworks. Wondering about how much reaching out is being done across sectors, like Representative Escobar. She's a real warrior on this issue, and
Yes.
how much in communication with the Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, yeah.
Or with Project Vita there, or with Association House.
Oh, yeah.
across denominations, across sectors, in order to, at Fort Bliss, as it was mobilized at one time, huge resource there that could be mobilized towards solution.
Yes.
But, and then I have the curiosity, are you talking about the Shawnee Valley, the place, the historical place where you are, or is it somewhere?
It's somewhere, it's actually near the original Fort Bliss, so it's right across the highway from UTEP. And there's the historic La Hacienda.
Oh, yeah.
Pancho Villa was married and hung out. Yes, so that's the spot. It's the hacienda sits at the center of that 4-acre site.
Oh, good.
And it's right adjacent to the fort. And I love thank you for highlighting this. And I could not agree more. And actually, we're in relationship with all of those voices and groups in various ways. So Ibarra is met with Congresswoman Escobar. We're in high relationship with Annunciation House. I forgot the other's unit, but
Project Vida.
Project Vida. We're on a lectionary call every week with yeah. So there's a beautiful I think there's a lot of folks who are trying to encourage each other, hold each other's arms. So folks are focused in their various spaces, but trying to hold each other up as well. Father Raphael at Sacred Heart, the foundation supports their work as well, as best as we can. And I think that's beautiful because what a historic, this is a historic Catholic parish and shelter in Segundo Barrio, known as the Other Ellis Island. And here's a Presbyterian foundation reaching out and saying, hey, we want to deepen friendship here. And so we often say we're Presbyterian by name, but ecumenical in mission. And that being Presbyterian is not a benefit or a barrier to receive a grant or support through this work. So to what you're describing, it's very much the heartbeat of where is God already at work? How can we come alongside and support and lock arms? So yeah. Okay, so how are we doing on time? We have a few more minutes?
Few more minutes. And,
Okay.
and a few of us have to leave for a meeting at 9:30, but the rest of you can stay for a while for worship. I'm gonna know what that wire thing is.
Yes, okay, so this wire thing here. I'm actually gonna highlight a part of this in the service through another angle, but this is a border ladder that our neighbors are using to hook to the top of the border wall. Desperation of folks on the move. They're normally 15 to 20 feet long. To travel here, we have a 2-foot version, but these are made out of rebar in construction sites in Chihuahua. And so you'll see this is very common all over parts of northern Mexico and really around the world. But they're normally, if you can imagine, a 15, 20-foot long ladder that, and with someone trying to climb. And we've had folks fall on the site. A woman broke her hip recently, about a year ago, maybe 8 months ago. A few years ago, a man in his mid-50s fell and broke both of his feet. Some say it was his legs at the same time. There was a sewage leak. He had swam through the sewage across the canal, the American Franklin Canal across the Rio Grande, and then got to the ladder, fell. Our team carried him through the courtyard to UMC hospital. They released him and he was sent back to his hometown. He called my friend Gustavo and said, I just want to let you know that our family would like to offer you hospitality for all that you've done. And we thought, here's a man who was literally running for his life, swimming through sewage, breaks both of his legs, and then calls a few months later to offer folks in the United States hospitality who are coming through his village. But that's a taste of what we've collected literally dozens and dozens of these letters on our site, about 150 plus letters. And that sticker I referred to is an artist actually that we've been collaborating with, and he recently created a sculpture that's on display off of Rim Road in El Paso through an art exhibit. And it's a giant migrant foot in honor of our loved ones. And you'll see this migrant memorial we wrote. I'm actually, if I have time in my sermon, I'm going to be a lot tighter than I was this morning. I promise I won't go in an hour during the service, but
Thank you.
but this is a memorial to the unknown migrant that we wrote in honoring stories that have been silenced and unheard or underheard at our border. And so this little booklet is an attempt to honor those stories. We won't go through all these principles, either fairly self-explanatory, but we're finding that these principles are important because, you know, whether it's online or in person, these principles can be adapted in all sorts of spaces, locally or globally. And I'll stop there for the sake of time, and I'll open it up before I close with a prayer. But I'm just curious. I hope this was meaningful on some level. I know it's a fire hose of information and reflection. Was this helpful today with sharing a little bit of our journey and the dynamic that we've joined in with? I hope.
As you said at the beginning, it's a good thing we can only see a portion of the journey of the road.
Yes, sir. If you had asked us a handful of years ago that we would be living in El Paso, I just would have never pictured it. I just didn't have it, you know. And so that poem at the beginning is really, it's an intimate poem.
Which book did that come from, by Jan? Do you know?
I don't know the book. I
I
saw it online. It is a public poem online.
It is, I could just look at it.
Yes, it's
Okay.
by Jan Richardson, for those who have far to travel.
Okay, for those who, thank you. I appreciate the reflection and thinking, why are we involved in this? I appreciate that very much. Because I think sometimes we jump in and start doing, and we need to have that reflection about why.
Well, that means, thank you. That means so much. We've been doing a lot of reflection around that idea of the why. I'm a big believer, and I'm attempting to learn in my short life. I'm in my late 40s now, and it's like as the years keep going, I think the essential nature of action in reflection is so crucial. So that we not only as individuals, but in community and with our neighbors and partners, that we're hearing one another and reflecting on the action we're taking, to keep asking the why. Why are we doing certain things, right? Or how would God have us respond? Where is God already at work? How can we join into that? And even the why behind the dynamic of why these organizations even exist, right? Whether it's the amazing work of Mark Adams or Trace Freedo's Border Foundation, but to think the why is in response to something. And when I think about what's happening, not only at the US-Mexico border, but around the world, that why is anchored in these push-pull factors we named out loud. That if we don't respond, what would happen if even among, say, just in circles of faith, if we say, that whole love God, love your neighbor thing, but the call to lean in and engage. Yes, thank you. That
we can help a bit on this, but PCE USA has hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, if not $1 billion in their totality. How much are they contributing financially to the effort, and could they not offer more if maybe we ask them to, maybe just we are the church?
Such a great question. I wish my friend John Nelson was with me right now. He just retired after 43 years serving as a Presbyterian pastor. And they are contributing in small ways. And actually, we're so grateful for the Presbyterian Disaster Assistance called PDA. And they're actually getting ready to visit next week. And we're so grateful. And we're in dialogue there about intentional ways we can grow this little foundation. Long story short, and I don't have these roots, but what I've understood from John and other leaders is that it's called the World Mission Foundation, I believe. But during the mid-2000s, when the violence in Juarez began to heighten, at the time they had full-time co-workers all up and down, I believe about 14. And all of that dissipated during the violent years. And so you have voices like Mark Adams and others who were able to stay rooted through their own support systems. But a lot of the funding went away. Things have been shrinking, and there's a lot of, and I don't want to over speak in areas that can't speak to. But right now we're attempting to call the church at large to say, okay, there's certain things that where resources or assets are maybe tied up in other ways. But yeah, actually, that's why this little foundation started, was because in response to so much drying up along the border, we said, well, we can't start with the whole border. It's a 2,000-mile strip, but we could start in the El Paso Juarez area and kind of build from there. And so that's what we're attempting to do. Yeah. And John could speak more to that question as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.